This is our first ever Globe Educator water cooler, where we're going to be focusing on all things Globe Educator. And my name is Jody Haney. For those of you who don't know, I am from the Excite Learning Bowling Green State University Toledo Zoo partnership. But more importantly, perhaps, is I've taken on a new role with the U.S. Globe office, working with Jen and her team. And part of that responsibility will be to lead these Globe Educator water coolers. They're going to be every month from 7 to 8 on a Wednesday of that month. And we'd love for you to invite some other Globe educators. This is really exciting, and we want to get as many Globe educators here as we can, and then all the support team around them. So that's really the goal. Tonight we have Angie Rizzi from NASA Langley, and she's going to be presenting My NASA Data Eclipse resources. Just a reminder to put your questions and comments in the chat, and we'll take care of those at the end of the cooler. We'll have a discussion at that point in time. And I think it's time. Oh, okay. Thanks, Jen. I think it's time for Angie to take it away, and I'll just keep watching as people enter, and we'll let people in as they do. Angie, it's all yours.
Thank you. Before we really get started, I'd like to introduce Christina Malote, because she actually, we worked on these My NASA Data Eclipse resources together. She's on the HEAT team, and I'm on My NASA Data, and I have to give her credit because she wrote most of this content, and it's great. And we hosted it on My NASA Data. It was great collaboration. And I don't know if you want to say anything, Christina, but I'm really glad you joined us tonight.
Yeah, thank you, Angie. I appreciate that. Yeah, like Angie said, so I'm Christina. I'm from the NASA Heliophysics Education Activation Team, or NASA HEAT. And this was just a fantastic collaboration. Our team has wanted to work with My NASA Data for a long time. Their platform is like no other. You know, I used to be a classroom teacher, and it's just such a great resource, and I'm happy to be part of it. So thank you for having me, Angie.
Thank you. So I'll share my screen, and let's see. Do you see it in presentation mode?
We're good, Angie. We can
okay, great. I think I've met most of the people in here, so I'll just do a super brief introduction of myself since you are recording this. I'm Angie Rizzi. I'm at My NASA Data at NASA Langley Research Center, but I also have done work with the Globe Clouds team at Langley, and I was a Globe teacher. So I taught for 12 years in middle school. I taught 6th, 7th, and 8th grade, all of the students in the whole middle school, and math. And I was able to do Globe with my students for several years with and I found it to be absolutely wonderful. I loved it so much that I ended up joining the team when there was an opportunity. So that's all I'm going to say about this. But I'm a huge, huge fan and supporter of the Globe program. This is what our My NASA Data landing page looks like. And you can see that this, I know some of you know this already, but our site is organized by Earth system sphere, and the solar eclipse phenomenon is under Earth as a system, and then it's solar eclipse. So that's how you can find that. And once you do, you'll be brought to a page that has mini lessons, interactives, or lesson plans. You will click on these to select between the different content types. And just to explain the different content types, mini lessons are short. They're hopefully able to be done in one class period or less, and they're student facing. They didn't used to be, but after COVID, we changed some of our content to make it student facing so they could be used asynchronously. The interactives are of varying lengths. They're also student facing, and they have some element to them that enables the student to interact with something digitally beyond just, say, filling out a question in a document or filling out a form. Like, it allows them to manipulate something, okay? And then the lesson plan and the interactives are varying lengths. The lesson plans are also varying lengths, but they are teacher facing. So they're all lesson plans. They're just sort of with a different focus. Okay. So I'm going to give you an example here of a mini lesson. And this is actually just a screenshot, but, or maybe not. Let me play this video. You don't need the sound. This is globe observations from the 2017 solar eclipse. And the students examine it and they answer some questions about it. This can help them with background information, predict what they think might happen with air temperature during an eclipse, give them, you know, some motivation to want to do these globe observations. I find for myself, the easiest thing to pay attention to, just because of the colors that my eyes are in tune to, is that I like to look for the pinks and see those hottest pink colors kind of change and then change back. But you can focus on other colors, and I'll just play it. So that's a mini lesson. That's one of the mini lessons. They can watch that. They answer some questions about it. That's not going to take you an entire class period to do. There are several other mini lessons. Move forward. Then we have the interactives, and excuse me. One of them is observing the sun during a total solar eclipse, and they go through the basic mechanics of a solar eclipse. And there's this big handout that they can download, but this is slides. I'm not going to play the video here.
Space Place.
And it breaks the slides break that big graphic down into smaller pieces. It talks to them, then they're able to, and we can look at this later if you want, but they're able to look at these images and drag and drop these. Is this a total eclipse, partial eclipse? And they drag and drop them onto the images. So that's what I mean by an interactive, because they're doing something with it. Here they can move these images and put them in the proper sequence for how it would be arranged during an actual eclipse. Then we move on to the next part. We look at the path of totality in 2017, which relates back to that globe video, visualization that we watched of the old globe data. So that's great. And they can say, where were they, drag an X to where they would have been during the 2017 eclipse. Hopefully they're older than 6 years old. Then they read this information. They can type in on the slide their answer. And then they make a plan for 2024. Okay. And look at the map for April 8th of 2024 and where will they be, and they can interpret this map and figure out what they anticipate that they will see. And then here we have a photo of an eclipse and then a coronagraph, which would be a way that we observe the sun when there's not an eclipse. And they can talk about what these images have in common, these different ways of viewing the sun. Then they explore some early drawings and images of eclipses and see if they can identify any features so they can move these arrows around. And it, talks about how we've studied the sun in the past, that we learn things during the eclipse because we can see that corona. And then they can actually do this really great activity and make their own corona image. And I had a teacher pilot this activity last year with her high school students. She piloted this whole lesson or this whole interactive. And she said that this was her high school students' favorite thing of the whole year, was making these corona images. And all it is you take a piece of black construction paper, you get some sort of round piece of paper or cardboard, you color the cardboard or the paper with chalk. It's kind of better to do like the side of the chalk so you can cover more area at once. And then you just smudge it out and you remove the circle and you have your corona image. They're fabulous. It doesn't take that long. It's fun. It's easy. And then they can look at the image and say, do I see anything that looks like a solar flare or a prominence or, various features that you would see on the sun. Okay. Are there any questions so far? I know I made slides just because sometimes, we can't do things live. Okay. Another type of interactive that we have is a story map. And the solar eclipse story map, which I am going to link out to it. We actually just renamed it yesterday, Learning from Stars and Solar Eclipses, because this story map covers a lot more than just eclipses. And this is going to be an absolute whirlwind tour through this. But first, we learn that the sun is a star, and it really goes through the life cycle of a star with little movie clips for each stage and descriptions. Then we end up here with this classic diagram. Okay. Like I said, it's a whirlwind tour. There are questions along the way for them to answer, and there are forms that they can fill out. Our story maps are written in the 5E model. So we move on to explore, and we talk about living with a star, and we've got the benefits and hazards of living with a star. What is space weather? How does it affect technology? We learn about different activity on the sun, space weather again, the whole solar cycle and predicting space weather, and solar wind. So you can see this is a lot more than just eclipses, right? And if you're doing some earth science, this covers a lot of standards. Then we would go into the explain.
Angie, Tracy has her hand up. Maybe you could take a moment we could hear from Tracy.
Thank you. Yes.
Hey, yeah, thanks, Jody. Thanks, Angie. This is awesome. Super excited to share this with our teachers. My question is on the story map. Is it grade directed? Are there chunks by grade level, or is it adapt for your grade level?
I would say it's a little bit adapt for your grade level. We do align it to these middle and high school standards here. So that's my answer. But we have pieces and parts of it broken out also. So you might be interested in that. Yep. So then in the explain, there's looking at how to safely observe the sun, make a pinhole projector, make an observation, looking at NASA stereo images, and then what is an eclipse? Partial, the path of totality, the corona, and the upcoming eclipse. Views of the sun, make your own eclipse drawing. Heliophysics mission fleet, the Parker Solar Probe, the indigenous knowledge. There are 2 movies in here of how well, it's actually, I think it's one long movie. It's about 12 minutes long, but it has 2 different indigenous ways of knowing about eclipses. So that's kind of interesting. And then in the elaborate, and I know I'm going through this so quickly, but where's my table of contents? So this is all about the elements that are formed in the stars. What are the main elements, of life? What elements are found in different parts of the universe? One of my favorite things in here is this periodic table of elements, but like what sort of activity, solar activity, produces the different elements. And so it goes through all of that. And then finally in the, watch your eyeballs, in the evaluate, they then are able to look at how we learn about exoplanets from stars. And then there's a graphic organizer that they can complete where it talks, they can show what the sun teaches us about space weather, elements and life on Earth, astrobiology, and exoplanets. So in this particular resource, eclipses is a small part of it, but this is something that a lot of teachers can still use. So those story maps, again, they're written in the 5E model. They're long. And a lot of teachers try to do just a certain part of them. And I'll show you in a minute how we have broken some of the parts out. Then we have lesson plans. And remember, those lesson plans are teacher facing. We have an elementary, middle, and high school version of a lesson plan that uses this graph. And this allows them to model how the positions of the sizes and the positions would sort of line up. It is not to scale. It is not orbital mechanics. But they place a quarter or a quarter size disc on the M1 and the S1 paths. The M positions are moon positions and the S positions are sun positions. And they can move the quarter from the position 1 to position 2. If you line them up correctly, you can make a little partial eclipse in the 2 positions and the 4 positions. And at 3, you can place them right on top of each other. And that's the point, right? Is that the moon would be blocking all the light from the sun. You can also use a nickel for the moon. And then when they line up, you can see that it does not completely block the quarter. And that would be an annular eclipse. So the middle and high school versions have the ability for the students to create the graph themselves, as well as in the high school version, like even more additional information about that. We also had one of our summer interns last summer come up with and write up this safety activity that is basically taking a paper plate. And I know that the heat team has their own version of this activity that is really great. But when I was teaching, I had students in the 2017 eclipse, and I was very concerned about them sort of doing this. if you can see me, looking above the glasses or below them, because, you know, they're not that wide. So I used like dessert plates, and this is what I made with my students. Roger, he stepped it up, the wonderful globe teacher that he is. And we have a lesson for that out there. So if you're interested in doing that, it just provides extra protection for the students, but they can do all, you know, they could decorate it, right? They could decorate phases of the moon if they wanted. All you know, their only limit is your imagination. So we did come up with a globe 1 week pacing guide for experiencing a solar eclipse. We will be producing another one for learning about a solar eclipse from My NASA Data. But since they can experience them this year, we came up with it. And I assume most of you are familiar with the globe pacing guides, but they all have the same format. There's a general information, there's background information. So the general information is information about the globe protocol that is highlighted in the pacing guide, who to contact if you have questions, how to get globe training, where to find all the pacing guides, what's the guiding question for the whole thing. And then every day there's a question that ties back to that guiding question. And then on the last day, there's a question that ties it all back to NASA. Sorry. So day 1 is, what are the different types of solar eclipses? That's a My NASA Data activity. Day 2 is modeling solar eclipse geometry. That's the one we just looked at with the quarters. 3, safely observing the sun. That takes them through pinhole projectors as well as eclipse glasses. Day 4 is using the Globe Observer eclipse tool from the Globe program. And then day 5, how is that visualization? How does a solar eclipse affect air temperature? And then they will relate that to what they observed on day 4. And there are always additional resources. So I'm going to link out and show it to you. So here's the general information. I will zoom in. Is that better for people? So you see there are links and information. We say here this is also supported by the NASA Heliophysics Education Activation Team. We are aligning it to standards. There's background information about eclipses for the teacher. We have the great map here, and then it says what the activity is, what your assessment options, the connection back to the guiding question and an answer. And it's all laid out for the teacher. And then we have a bunch of additional resources at the end. So very similar to the other pacing guides that are out there. So this is 15 pages long, but there's a lot of information in it. So what I thought might be fun would be to go and try this safely observing the sun activity if you want. Remembering that you can tailor these if you want, right? In My NASA Data, and I'll just show you, this will ask you to make a copy of the slides. So now you'll have your own copy of the Google Slides. And then let's say you have eclipse glasses and you don't need to talk to your students about a pinhole projector. You could take that out. Or maybe you don't have eclipse glasses and you only want to talk to them about a pinhole projector. But this is all about being safe. So we'll copy this link and put it in the chat. Or I can ask, would you rather do that? Would you rather go and just explore the eclipse phenomenon and see the other resources out there? It's really up to you what you want to do.
I know that for the last solar eclipse, there was an addition or an app added to the Globe Observer app on eclipses. And I assume that that will probably be added for this. I just wonder if there would be any connection either, well, both ways, from the Globe Observer site and from the, from the app when you click into it, that these resources are available. So, yeah, that's my question. And then I have a follow-up, if you don't mind if I ask too.
So the app will be available. The tool will be available in the app. It will go live a little. Oh, that's my timer, my 5-minute timer. It'll go live short, within some short time frame before the eclipse, and then stay live a little bit after. Jen might know more about the exact dates. I do not anticipate that from within the app we would be linking to these resources, but the Globe Observer website will link all kinds of resources. Also, on the Heat Teams page, they're linking a bunch of eclipse resources as well. And then we have the pacing guide, that can be linked. And we're developing another pacing guide that's really only the My NASA data activities, so that in years when students don't have the opportunity to experience an eclipse, they can still, because in middle school, you still have to learn about them. Then we still have the resources for learning about the eclipses and a pacing guide for that. Thank you, Christina.
Yeah, and
go ahead, David, your second question. That's what I was going to come to.
Yeah, I was just going to say about the pacing guide. It was easy to find for me because I just went to Google and put Globe Pacing Guide, and it took me to the site. But when I put in Pacing Guide on the Globe site, it doesn't take me there, and it doesn't show up. And then when I went to Globe, I know. I know what it was. After I found it in Google, I looked at the cookies there to see, or the steps, to go backwards. And it took me to, I think, the United States or something. Well, there was the NASA Langley piece. But then when I went back to the US page, NASA Langley wasn't on the left-hand side for me to click on. So I wonder if there's a way that can be clarified. I guess because that made me think the other part that I have trouble finding a lot of times are the bundles. And I think both of these tools are wonderful tools. So if there's a way to have them come out a little bit stronger, I think that would be great. And I liked it once I found the pacing guide on the Globe site. There's many of them there, but just hard to find. And if that can be made easier, like you said, if you put it on the Globe Observer site, I mean, that'll be perfect, of course.
Mm-hmm. I agree with you. And I do know sometimes the Globe website is so big that it's hard to find everything. Kristen, I didn't see that you were here. Awesome.
No, she's not, but we've been communicating.
Oh.
I don't think she is. We've been communicating with her about her resources for the eclipse.
Mm-hmm.
So I'll put some links in here with things that she had sent me. So we can just capture all of those here, because those are ones that came from the Globe Observer site. So I will just put in those links here. And I hear you, Dave, about the pacing guides and making things more accessible on the website. That is hopefully going to come soon.
And yes, as far as Kristen Weaver goes, Globe Mission Earth has been working with Kristen, and she's going to come in and talk about that tool to a meeting that we have, a virtual meeting. I'm wondering if that would be of interest for this group, if we schedule that for later in the year before the April eclipse. Would that be of interest to look at the tool, the eclipse tool that will be in the Globe Observer? Okay, so we can reach out to Kristen on that and see if we can get her scheduled for first of the year, January, February, somewhere right in there.
So I would like to echo something I know Globe Mission Earth has been talking about some as well, and that is that, you know, the October annular eclipse is on a Saturday. It is not necessarily the best opportunity to work with students, although it's not impossible. But it's a great opportunity for us to practice, get used to the tool, practice, you know, whatever we want so that we're prepared in April. And the other thing I would like to stress, and this is just my personal opinion, but having been in the classroom for many years, my opinion is that whether or not you're in school, whether or not you have students for either of the eclipses, at least doing this one of the safety lessons with them, and perhaps making a pinhole projector or using, you know, you can do the one out of a box, but the heat team has a much simpler, just flat version even of a pinhole projector, because they're going to look up and the students need to know what the safety aspects of it are. So that's just kind of my own little soapbox, but I do feel that that's very important. So if you do nothing else, at least talk about eclipse safety. Go ahead.
I was just gonna say, one challenge of the idea of practice is that the annular eclipse is on one side of the country and the total solar eclipse is on the other side of the country.
That's
So
true, but the
we
whole
have a one-shot deal here in California, which is
well, that
great.
is true. That is true, but I believe the entire continental US will have at least a partial eclipse for both of them. So it's true. You may not be observing a total eclipse unless you're in that small area in Texas. And even the annular is not completely total. But like I took my students out in 2017. We did not experience totality. They still thought it was awesome. You know, so they had to keep the glasses on the entire time, just like we have to in October. But they loved it. And I experienced an eclipse when I was in 6th grade, and we had to use pinhole projectors. We didn't have any kind of safety glasses, and I still remember that. So it is a really cool experience. And again, because most people aren't going to be able to see, you know, the fullness of both of these, that safety comes in.
So Angie, I like the animation you showed of the 2017, because there were things outside the path, but notice that data was important. So
Yes.
what we're trying to tell our teachers in Toledo is, again, practice, get some data, and it'll be on the map, but the data will be important for comparison.
Yes. And I think it also is kind of encouraging to them that like something actually happens with it, because they're seeing that something happened with it before. I mean, there's papers that have been written with the data and all kinds of things.
Yes, there was a paper on cloud observations from
Yes.
all the globe observations, cloud observations that were done.
So these, what I shared tonight is the My NASA Data and Heat team resources that we developed together, and then the Globe 1 week pacing guide. But the Globe Observer team has lots of other great activities and resources as well. And they've worked really hard and they come up with fabulous resources too. There's a lot of excitement about the eclipses.
I just dropped a link in the chat. It's not a NASA resource, but it is a really nice one. It shows you what you're going to see for either the October or the April eclipse from your location. So you can put your location in, and then it's a simulator, so you can change some different, things and see what's going to happen at different time spans and so forth. So that would be a nice one too. And I think, Janet, I would like you to confirm whether that's the one you were talking about. Kristen and I were talking about it today, so I'm not sure exactly which one we're talking about, but this one looks good. But Kristen shared this one with me.
Is this the one that tells you how long your totality or annularity will be? Because there's one that tells you how long it will be.
Yes, it does. And I will, I'll share my screen just for a moment, if I will. This is for Maumee, Ohio. This is for the April, And so you can see that I can just slide this timer to see, this is 1:58 p.m. and I can slide the timer to see what I'm going to see at what time. And then when we get to the total, there it is, and so forth. So a really nice tool. You can change fine time is kind of fine tuning it a little bit more than what you can below. You can actually play it as a clip, and then you can zoom it a little bit too. So I haven't played with the tool too much, but it looks pretty good. Yeah, and I like Jen's comment in the chat as well. She made a comment that's so wonderful that there are My NASA Data activities for the eclipse. It builds the activities around the event, so it becomes more than just a short moment in time, but a learning experience that will stay with the students. I think that's nicely said.
And also, I believe, I'm not sure, I feel like we've added land cover this year to the eclipse tool, and it isn't just taking the temperature that they can do. They can make a few different observations, and I think that's also really great too.
Yes, with our work with the Toledo Zoo, the zoo is focusing on doing ethograms. So watching an animal species during actually setting up a camera so you don't miss the eclipse, and then replaying it and seeing what happens to animal behaviors, insects in the prairie or just out in your lawn, and then doing an ethogram every 30 seconds, doing an observation and seeing if they're feeding or active or inactive or socializing or whatever they're doing, and seeing if we can see some differences. And we actually found an app for that helps kids do that right on their device, or a teacher doing it right on a device. So that'll be exciting too. And we're trying to do that in conjunction with globe data, globe observation.
That sounds really fun. I see Lynn put a comment that in 2017, there was a lot of interest after people experienced the eclipse, and that this will be good to have these resources to build on that. And I think that that's great to hear. That's great to hear. Because really, all of these My NASA data, the pacing guides, when we put them together, we just make kind of some hard choices of picking 5 things and putting them in what might be a logical order. And that is why we have so many other additional resources, because not everything is going to be the same for every teacher, right? So there's a lot for them to choose from. Everything went quiet, even though they weren't in totality. Started on a cloudy day, cleared during the eclipse, and then clouded over again. That is exactly the kind of observations we would love to have. I know that we talk about that a lot on the Globe Clouds team, is how might clouds change during an eclipse, or how might clouds impact the temperature change during an eclipse. And I know there are projects also doing work with sonification, and how might the animal sounds change during an eclipse.
That would be Soundscapes is the NASA project name.
Thank you, Janet.
And we were going to partner with Audio Moth as well. So
Oh, good.
to be able to do the recording.
I agree, Jen, that collecting data gets people to notice more.
Christina, maybe you want to say out loud what you said about safety, the difference between the partial and the total eclipse, because I think that's a really important point that I was unaware of until we went to Denver and had the keynote speaker on heliophysics, that you could actually take your glasses off during the total. So if you would say that one more time out loud, that would be great.
Sure. I just put in the chat that, one of the challenges that we're facing is that the annular solar eclipse in 2023 and the total solar eclipse in 2024 have two different safety messages. So for the 2023 annular eclipse, even though if you're in the path of annularity and you have the experience of having 90% coverage of the sun, 90% is still not 100%. And so for that eclipse, it's glasses on the entire time. And, for most people in the United States for 2024, it will be glasses on for the entire time during the partial. And really the only time you can take them off is during that totality. And so we're just trying to empower as many people as possible in these communities to feel comfortable enough to know, when is that moment, and having guidance. And it's just for a few minutes. So really preparing students and parents and educators that they're going to be wearing their glasses most of the time.
Thank you.
I do also think the heliophysics big year is really exciting. If you want to share anything about that, Christina.
Sure. Yeah. So it's modeled on a birder's big year. And there's sort of another pun in there because not only is it a big year for heliophysics with the two eclipses, also the the sun is getting a lot of activity. We're approaching solar maximum, so we're going to have a lot more sunspots, solar flares, coronal mass ejections, opportunities to monitor space weather here on Earth. So it's pretty exciting. So it's a big year because it actually starts in October 2023 with the annular solar eclipse, and it ends in at the end of 2024 when Parker Solar Probe is going to make its closest orbit to the sun. It will travel within 1 million miles of the sun and into the corona. So we'll be getting unprecedented data from that mission. And so that's sort of the motivation is after 2024 ends, we still have so many opportunities to observe the sun in solar max, and then this amazing NASA mission that is like no other.
Yeah, it's exciting. There's a question about students collecting data wherever they are because the April eclipse is on spring break. And I think there are a few different options for that. First of all, the tool is an app that can be downloaded to a phone. Now, we generally say 13 and older, but certainly parents can do that. The students could also collect data on paper forms, and you could enter it in if you're a trained Globe teacher, or I believe there's a way that you can also email it in to somebody on the Eclipse team who can then get that into the system. The other thing is, I think it would be more fun if they can collect their own data. Of course, you need to teach them the safety protocol. But also, my approach as a teacher would also likely be, well, I'll collect data for sure. And then we can always look at that data together as a class after the event. So I think there are a few different ways to approach that, but it might be a really nice way to involve families.
Thanks, Angie. That's a great response. And I also know that libraries and other places are sponsoring events. BGSU will be sponsoring an event at the football field. So I think when time comes closer, hopefully those events will be announced, and families could gather at these other larger events if school's not taking place that day. We have that a lot up here. There's spring breaks happening, and in Ohio, almost every school district I've talked to has canceled school for the eclipse. So we're going to have to come up with some things that can be done either at home or in large groups at informal events.
So I have a question. I teach life science, so this isn't really my my area of teaching, but I love it. Our students it's right at dismissal. Like when it starts in New Jersey, where we're at, the kids are ending school, getting on the bus. And by the time it ends, they're getting off the bus. Any suggestions I'm going to email like my administrators and just let them know, like, I don't even know if they know this is going to happen. But, and I'm, like I said yesterday in our Zoom, I'm going to go back to Indiana, where I'm from, so I can see the total. But anything like how should I bring it up with them? I don't think they're that forward thinking that this will even be on their radar.
I've heard some things. I've heard there are some schools that this is one reason why some schools are closing, is because they realize that the students, might be outside, be getting on and off buses. They're not really sure. Then they would rather just not have it associated with the schools, right? Some schools have also considered extending their days that day, or, just shifting the schedule for one day so that the students are at school. In the 2017 eclipse, when I was teaching, it was our first day of school and we had a noon dismissal. So I organized an after school activity, and we had students, we had all kinds of permission slips and safety releases and all of that kind of stuff. And, we had it in all of the like orientation information, and we organized the event and had the kids stay after school. But every school's going to have to figure out what works for them or school district. And if you're not going to be there, you obviously wouldn't be running an after school activity yourself.
No, normally if I was going to be there, I would, but I'm like, I can't not miss this. So this is like a once. I didn't see it last time I was still in New Jersey. I didn't travel to see it. So yeah, I definitely have to head back to Indiana. But
Yeah, well,
I think they need to make parents aware too. Like these kids are going to be,
Can I share an idea?
Yeah.
Yeah, I put in the chat the July-August issue of Science Scope was really good. It's all focused on the eclipse. And there is an article in there, and I did a podcast. I put the link to the podcast that I had. It was just a 4-minute overview. But the whole article was on how do you prepare for this? What do you do in schools? How do you prepare parents? How do you prepare administration? And then what are some of the pushbacks that you're going to see? So I think if you want to just listen to that podcast just to get an idea, but check out that July-August Science Scope magazine.
You know what?
It was
And
excellent.
I actually have that one, and I saw it and set it in my pile of things to read. So I'll have to.
That's a good one.
Yeah.
Well, and another angle you can present, because we traveled for the 2017, we actually missed the first day of school, and we went to Tennessee, and traffic was an absolute nightmare. So our school, That was supposed to be our first day back from spring break, and they just extended our spring break by a day and made it a PD day for the teachers. So the kids wouldn't be there because it would be the same boat. Our kids would be on the bus traveling back and forth. But the
That,
thing that got our superintendent to do the switch, I don't think was so much the safety issue as far as viewing the eclipse, but it was the fact that buses could possibly be 3 to 4 hours late and they'd have to pay the
yeah.
bus drivers overtime. So that might be an angle to take
Yeah,
it from.
you know, and that's true. And we were still, because we in New Jersey, we don't start till after Labor Day. So we were still, everybody was still on the beach together on a, you know, it was still our summer break in 2017. So that's a good point. Because traffic around here is horrendous anyways. And I'm sure everybody will be heading to the beach because that's an awesome viewing, you know, no obstructions or anything. So, good point. Thanks, guys.
Well, I think John came in with a great quote. Eclipses are always better at the beach. Yeah, I think that's a good way maybe to end. We all have to find a beach. Diane, we're all going to come your way, I guess, for the eclipse.
Yeah, you come my way because I'm headed west.
Okay. Well, I think that brings us to the end of the hour, our very first Educator Cooler. Let's just carry on. Let's invite some others, invite some friends, and let's really make this a great community to support all the good things that are happening with our partnerships and with our teachers, our educators. So thanks everyone for attending, and we'll see you next time.